Hey everybody, gonna do a nice quick one today. Just wanted to talk a little bit about one of my biggest pet peeves with the game, which is the total lack of weapon diversity in the end game. Early on, when you start playing Skyblock, there's so much weapon diversity. There's swords with various abilities, like the Dreadlord sword, the Rogue sword, things, staffs. Early game, the Rosetta sets, all sorts of different variety that helps you play the game in different ways, early game, mid game, etc. Then you've got the juju, you've got the dragon short bow, you've got all these various different things that play through in early game and in mid game. And then when you get to late game, you have two choices. You can use a Terminator or Hyperion. You can change your armor set, you can change your equipment, you can change your pet, but you will not be changing your weapon. Unless you're playing M7 Mage and you're using a Chimera 5 Dark Claymore, or you're playing True Berserk, which nobody does, then the chances, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people do, then the chances that you'll actually use anything other than a Hype and a Terminator is basically zero. Okay, it dominates with how good Terror armor already is. Its synergy with Terminator is absolutely ridiculous, even post-nerf, meaning that there's no, even if there was a bow in the game that was supposed to overshadow the Terminator, unless it shot multiple arrows, it simply wouldn't be as good. And that's pretty ridiculous. That's a poor place for balancing to be at. And then, of course, to talk about the Hyperion, easily the most broken, overpowered weapon in the game. I understand it's not exactly a hot take to say that the Hyperion is good, but I'm very tired of having to choose between those two weapons for all of the content that I do. There's so much tool diversity in so much of the game, farming, fishing, all these different tools and ways of doing them that you can try, but when it comes to combat, you're pretty much screwed. You really don't have any diversity. I mean, look at trying to do like Ash Fang, for example. You can melee some of those guys, right? Of course you can. However, there's no real reason to do anything other than grab a Hype and burst down the mage ones. Okay, because Hype is just that good. Okay, let's talk about the Magma boss, the Crimson Isles mini boss, okay? That alone I shouldn't say requires, but nearly requires a Terminator. I mean, the amount of magma glares and magma cubes that you have to deal with, comboed with the absolutely ridiculous amount of HP and time that it takes to push the magma boss, it's just another thing that's very clearly been balanced around the Terminator. And I don't like that. I'm tired of seeing multiple parts of the same game be balanced around a single individual item. Okay, and I shouldn't say a single individual item because it's really two, the Hyperion and the Terminator. Okay, Kudra. You have to have a Term and a Hype to be able to do it. I mean, you can get by with a Yeti sword in the early tiers, but that is not going to last. I understand that's high-level content, but at the same time, I really feel like I should have some option for crowd clear other than just having the Hype around while, somebody else does supplies or however it is that people do it. It gets a little bit frustrating to have this complete lack of diversity. To feel like, oh boy, I'm going to have all of these items in my bar, but only two of them are actually going to be weapons. Everything else is going to be utility items and such. And that just stinks. That's no fun to deal with. So I feel like SkyBlock would really benefit from more weapon diversity. They need to add in some swords, like true Berserk swords that actually function based off of procs and scale appropriately, just like mage weapons do. Okay, because it shouldn't just be that I get a mage weapon and I buff the shit out of my intelligence to do damage and that's my choice. I should be able to get a melee weapon and do a comparable amount of damage without having to invest significantly more into it. Okay, or be in the right scenario, like being a Berserk in dungeons. I want to actually be able to feel like meleeing things is worthwhile in any scenario. I should have, as a player, the option to choose between which weapons I want to use to handle something. And some things will certainly be more efficient than others, but there shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all solution like it is with the Hype or the Terminator, okay? A Terminator with bouncy arrows is absolutely fucking broken. It is absolutely broken. And so because of that, there's literally nothing else that you should use for bow damage, especially not when you need to deal damage to, like, wither skeletons in F7 or something like that. So a lot of the time you're stuck choosing not only between, those two weapons, but then on top of that, trying to tailor your gameplay to be able to actually use those weapons, which is even worse feeling. Because I don't want to have to choose, that I'm going to change my armor or my equipment or, have to wear an implosion belt, for example, to be able to use my Hyperion efficiently. Okay, I shouldn't feel like I have to wear at least one piece of terror to be able to use my Terminator efficiently. There needs to be more variety, more options, not just this is the best thing and you're going to build around that and you're going to like it. Okay, people are interested in dynamic, varying gameplay that comes in different forms. And one of the things that SkyBlock struggles with the most is their grinds being repetitive. Okay, you can have repetitive grinds. That's an important part of an MMORPG. I completely agree with that. But a big part of it is also making sure that the grinds that you're making repetitive aren't so ungodly repetitive that they turn people away from the game or they cause people to just lose interest in something, right? You want there to be enough of a change despite it being repetitive, right? Let's look at another MMO like RuneScape. Killing some of the bosses in RuneScape is unbelievably repetitive. But because they have a mixture of often randomly or systematically applied mechanics, you actually know that there's going to be some variety and some reactiveness and some change in the fight. But when you're dealing with something like Kudra, I mean, other than in Infernal, it's literally the simplest formula, right? You have your hype. You hype around the arena, you fish up the supplies. Okay, you've done that. Somebody stuns Kudra. Now you go to the side, you swap to your terror with a warden's helmet, and you beat the shit out of it until it's dead. Okay, what weapon are you going to use for that? Your only choice is to use a Terminator. Nothing else is worth it. So that just doesn't feel good. And sure, like you could use a Juju shortbow. You could use whatever you wanted. But that doesn't make those things worthwhile to use, and I shouldn't have to downgrade my gameplay and what I'm getting and what I can do just so that I can basically be screwed over by the diversity as well. That's just not good game design. People need to be able to feel like they're actively thinking about things and reacting to things, especially when it's high skill or quote unquote high skill content like Kudra, right? It shouldn't all be muscle memory. And I think that Dungeons is probably the best example that I can give in terms of like what diversity in a fight might look like. But again, it falls down to the same problem, which is what do you use inside Dungeons? Oh, a Terminator and a Hyperion, or a Claymore if you're like crazy maxed. That's not interesting. You've got so much diversity in the early game, and then once you get into the late game, there's 2 weapons? That's absurd. And then also to talk about deployables a little bit, we really only have 2 choices for deployables as well, which is Plasma Flux or, the SOS Flare. And they do 2 very different things as well. One can't necessarily be called better than the other per se. Those are situational, and you have to choose between the 2 of them. But why don't we have another kind of deployable that perhaps causes defensive downgrades but offensive upgrades, and then another one that causes offensive downgrades and defensive upgrades, right? There's so much potential with things like deployables, but instead we're stuck with this total lack of diversity. So that's a little bit of a tangent just about something that's also related to the same idea, but I think the main focus here should be that the Hyperion and the Terminator are so dominant that nothing else can take their place, and anything that comes into the game has to be balanced around them, right? The entire Aurora rework didn't take place because of Midas Staff, didn't take place because of Dreadlord's sword. It had to take place because of how powerful Hyperion was. The Crimson rework didn't take place because Dark Claymore was too good, didn't take place because Giant Sword was too good. It happened because the Hyperion was too good. Okay, so this entire game is essentially balanced around, if not 1 weapon, then 2. And I think that that is a huge disadvantage. It takes away players' autonomy and ability to make weapon-based decisions for the things that they're encountering. So I think a really high priority for the Hypixel team should be to look into how they can add more end-game weapons that are just good at what they do, but also can be situational and feel like, okay, in this situation, I would thrive by using this weapon, but in this situation, I would thrive by using this weapon, right? I think the Slayer weapons start to embody that, but again, that's not really useful for anything outside of the Slayer itself. We're talking about weapons that can be used really anywhere. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have today to say in regards to this whole debacle about weapon diversity, the Hyperion, the Terminator, and things like that. I would love to hear your comments down below what you guys think about just the complete lack of variation when it comes to endgame weaponry. Do you want to see more? Are you content with the lack of variation? Some people are a fan of simplicity. Let me know down in the comments what you think, and I really appreciate you guys tuning into the video, and I will catch you next time.